Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today I am chatting about one of my favorite topics, and that is of course eyeshadow palettes. I wanted to film a best and worst new eyeshadow palettes video, but honestly out of all of the new eyeshadow palettes that I've been trying, I haven't really tried one that I would put in the worst category. So I thought instead I would just talk about 5 new eyeshadow palettes that I've really been loving lately. Make sure you let me know in the comments below which eyeshadow palettes you're loving lately, because I truly would love to hear from you guys, and let's jump into it. Okay, let me kick it off with the Urban Decay Beached Eyeshadow Palette. A lot of you guys have been asking me about my thoughts on this palette. It comes with 8 shadows, so it's a little bit more of a simple palette. You don't get overwhelmed by shade selection. It is a very warm-toned palette, so if you cover up those blue shades, you do kind of get the feel that it is, you know, something that Urban Decay already has in their collection. A lot of you guys have been asking me if you have Urban Decay's Naked Heat, if you need this palette, and I'll get into that in just a second, but let me just go over the formula. I think the formula is so good. I feel like it is Urban Decay quality, and the last Urban Decay palette that I tried was the Back Talk palette, and honestly I was disappointed by that palette. I just felt like it wasn't up to like Urban Decay's standard, and I think the metallic shadows in this palette are so richly pigmented and smooth and beautiful. There's only one matte shadow in here, but it's like the same exact formula as the matte shadows in the Urban Decay Naked palettes. The shade Salt is kind of like a satin shadow, and the rest of them are like true metallic shadows. I don't think there are any shadows in here that perform poorly, so I think the quality is definitely there. The packaging is a little bit different, so instead of like your typical like fold open palette, it opens like this, and then you can flip it around and set the palette down, and the mirror is right here on the side. I actually think it's great for travel, especially with summer right around the corner. I know a lot of people are going to be traveling, and if you're looking for like a staple warm palette to travel with maybe a few pops of color, this might be a great option for you. It's definitely more affordable than the Naked palettes. The only con that I can really think of is that it does come with mainly metallic shadows. I love metallic shadows, but I know a lot of people kind of need more mattes to make a palette complete. A lot of you guys were saying you were interested in it, but you were just kind of disappointed there weren't more matte shadows, which I can totally understand, especially if you don't have a palette in your collection that you think would pair well with this one. If you have the Urban Decay Naked Petite Heat or any of the Naked Basics palettes, those are going to be great companion palettes to this one. So a lot of you guys, like I said, were asking me how these two compare. There are 4 shadows in these palettes that are very, very similar. Because the Beached palette only comes with 8 shadows, about 50% of the palette is almost identical to shades in the Naked Heat palette. So I think if you have the Naked Heat, you definitely don't need this palette, especially if you already have blue shadows in your collection that you really love, just because you'll be able to recreate very similar looks using the Naked Heat palette. You know, obviously I have both of them. I did not buy this one. They sent it to me as PR. I think the quality is really good, but I probably wouldn't have purchased it on my own just because I can create very similar looks using the Naked Heat palette, and this is like one of my favorite palettes of all time. The other question that I get a lot is if the Dream Street palette from ColourPop is a dupe for Urban Decay's Beached. It's definitely not a dupe. There are actually only 2 shadows in the Dream Street palette that are similar enough that I would call them dupes, or, you know, good alternatives. And when you look at the palettes next to each other, they do look very similar. Like, they obviously have a similar vibe. They're warm-toned palettes with 2 like greenish blue pops of color, but the ColourPop Dream Street palette comes with 7 matte shadows, whereas this one only comes with 1 matte shadow. If you want to save a little bit of money, get more variety, get more options, go with ColourPop. But if you like the Urban Decay formula, I mean, this one's not going to let you down at all. Overall, it is a really, really good palette. I'm very, very happy with the quality of this palette. I think it's a fair price. I think it's a fun option for summer, and I've been reaching for it a lot lately. You can just create a lot of fun looks using it. So I did talk about this palette in a haul update video, so I won't spend too much time on it, but I have to mention it in this video because I've been reaching for this palette every single day, and I like to kind of mix and match my palette. So I'll use some shadows from this palette, some shadows from another palette, but no matter what I do with my makeup, I generally use at least 1 or 2 shadows from this palette. I do not regret buying this palette at all. I just think it was totally worth every single penny. It is from Anastasia, and it is the Soft Glam Eyeshadow Palette. I went back and forth about whether or not I needed to add this palette to my collection because it is a neutral palette, but at the same time, it's a lot different than a lot of the neutral palettes in my collection, and I know some of you guys are probably rolling your eyes right now because you look at it and it looks like a neutral palette. They're very typical browns, but I don't feel like that's where this palette shines. I think the metallic shadows in this palette are so gorgeous. gorgeous, and they just amp up your eye look. So obviously it's very nice to go in with like those staple neutral browns and just get your base shadows laid down, but then you can go in with any one of the metallic shadows and it just amps the look up. I know a lot of you guys have been loving this palette as well, and then there are a couple of you that are like hesitant to buy it because you feel like it is a boring neutral palette, but it keeps calling your name. If you have the money to spend on it, I don't think you would regret it. I think the fact that the formula is so high quality makes a big difference, because when I want a seamless, easy eye look that's just a little bit more fun and interesting than your typical go-to like neutral eye, this is the palette that I reach for because it just blends beautifully. The colors are really fun and I can't get enough of it. It has quickly become an essential for me. This is such a surprising favorite for me. I did not think I was going to like this palette. I actually almost did not even try it. I was just going to pass it along to somebody else because I didn't think it was going to be, you know, that great of a palette, but I was reviewing the entire collection, so I wanted to try out everything so I can give a good, well-rounded review. I love Smashbox. They are one of my favorite brands, but I've always said that I haven't been the biggest fan of their eyeshadow palettes. I just feel like in general, they haven't been able to create an eyeshadow formula that has really become one of my essentials, including their cover shop palettes. I actually just decluttered all of them from my collection, and they aren't terrible palettes, but they never really drew me in. Like, I never reached for them over other palettes in my collection. I just felt like the formula was kind of okay, and when you're buying a high-end palette, you want it to perform really well. So they did a great job with the colors, but the formula is so good. Like, it's a few steps up from any of the other Smashbox shadows that I've tried. The metallic shadows are so like creamy and smooth. You can go in and layer them on the eyes with your finger, but you can just take a dry brush and apply them like that, and there's no fallout. They look really shimmery and pigmented and beautiful on the eyes with a dry brush, which I feel like is an indicator that it's a good metallic shadow. So you do get 6 metallic shadows, and I just like the way this palette is laid out. You get the 2 larger like highlight shades that you can use either all over the lid, in the inner corner, the brow bone, and then you get 4 like mid-range metallic shadows right here, and they're all beautiful colors. And then on the outside you get 2 matte shadows. So I wear the lightest one in the crease kind of as a transition. I will wear the darker brown in the outer corner or as a liner color, because most days I don't line my eyes with eyeliner. Probably maybe like once a week I do these days, and I'll usually just go in with like eyeshadow as liner. So I've been reaching for this dark brown really often, and it's pigmented and smooth, and I'm just so impressed by the quality of this palette. So I've been testing out the Too Faced Natural Eyes palette for a little while. They did release the Natural Eyes palette and the Natural Matte palette. I haven't used the Natural Matte palette enough to be able to tell you guys whether or not I would recommend it. I wanted to be able to use it, but I've been testing out a lot of palettes, obviously. So this one has kind of taken a back seat. I'll definitely keep you posted on how this one works for me in an upcoming video. But in the meantime, I wanted to test this one out because the original one was actually like my very first high-end eyeshadow palette purchase years ago, like probably like 7 or 8 years ago. I think they've redone it a few times since then, but I haven't tried any of the other versions. So I know some of the colors are different, some of the formulas are different. So I just wanted to test this one out and see how it kind of compared to my very first high-end eyeshadow palette. So I always say that I don't buy products based on packaging, and I don't. Like, if a product is packaged really beautifully, but the actual quality of the product isn't very good, I'm not going to spend my money on it just for the packaging. But I will say that I've been appreciating like beautiful, high quality packaging more than ever, and it does make a difference when you're using the product. This is definitely my favorite packaging that they've done. It just feels beautiful and luxurious and high end, and if you're looking for a gift for somebody, this is going to be a great option. Like, sometimes I buy my mom like an eyeshadow palette as a gift, and I know she would like love getting a palette like this. I will say the formula is a good everyday formula. I have a lot of Too Faced palettes in my collection. Some of them are hits, most of them are hits, a couple of them are misses, but I find this formula just to be like a good staple formula. I think that the mattes are similar to the mattes in the Too Faced chocolate bar palettes. Like, they're blendable, they're easy to work with, they're good everyday shadows, but I think the metallic shadows are a little bit different. These metallic shadows are very lightweight on the eyes, so they're great for everyday wear. If you just want a shimmery wash of color without being too intense or too like overly pigmented, these are going to be a great option for you. I love love super intensely pigmented metallic shadows, but I feel like sometimes it's nice to go in with something a little bit more lightweight just because it's very easy to work with, especially for a quick everyday eye, because I have a tendency to start off with like intentions of doing an everyday eye, and then it turns into something really smoky and really dramatic. And I like the way that this palette is set up, because if you are new to makeup or you get really overwhelmed by, you know, palettes with a bunch of shadows in them, then this might be a great option for you, because at least how they used to describe it, they set it up for 3 complete looks. So you could use this row for one look, this row for one look, and then the third row for one look. But of course you could go in with whatever shadows in whatever order that you want. It's just there for you if you don't really know where to start. And honestly, for me, back in the day when I first bought like my very first high-end eyeshadow palette, that was really, really helpful, because I didn't even know where to begin. So I do like this palette a lot. I think the formula is just a good everyday formula. I think if you have a bunch of palettes in your collection, you don't need this one, because you will have colors that are very similar. You will have formulas that are probably better than this one. But if you're just starting off, or you're looking for a gift for somebody, or you just like this palette and Too Faced shadows in general, I do think you would really enjoy it. I find myself reaching for it a lot. But that is the end of my video. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about a couple of my favorite eyeshadow palettes of the moment. I would definitely love to hear from you. So if you've been testing out any palettes, or you've fallen in love with any old favorites, let me know in the comments below so I can check them out if I haven't already. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.